Portstewart, pretty as a picture postcard, no matter what the weather. It's the adopted home of Angelo Morelli, who arrived from Italy in the early 1900s and established a family business that has become something of a landmark in the town, serving up ice cream treats to generations of holidaymakers. Morellis. Angelo Morelli is now 95. He's long retired and living in southern Italy, but he's returned to Portstewart for a reunion of the Morelli family. The extended family is now spread right across the globe, but they've all made an effort to return for this special family get-together.
Buon appetito. Buon appetito.
The ice cream business has given 3 generations of the Morellis a good lifestyle, allowing them to indulge their passion for boats, golf, travel, and fast cars. But things weren't always like this. For the Morelli story has more humble beginnings, far away from the coastline of Portstewart. Theirs is a story touched by war, internment, and family separation, with some remarkable good fortune along the way. But through it all, their family bonds held true. The Morelli story starts here in the village of Casalatico in the Abruzzi Mountains of Italy, just south of Rome.
I was born here the 21st of October, 1907. Things were very uncomfortable here because the family was very large. My father had 8 brothers. The accommodation was very poor. Things were very difficult. The area is mainly agricultural, still is, of course, but the methods of tilling the land was very, very, very primitive, and it didn't really respond generously to the work the people had to put into it.
Like so many before him, Angelo had to leave the valley in search of work. He packed his bags and set off for Ireland to join up with his uncle Peter, who was then running a cafe in Coleraine. But young Angelo had big ambitions. He wanted more than simply to work in his uncle's shop.
Fish and chips and ice cream. I would have liked to have done something better than that particular type of work. We had no electricity in those days. So that meant pasteurizing the milk and turning it, stirring it, cooling it to the best of our ability. Then making ice cream by hand as well, turning and then spading, and it took an awful lot of work.
It was all work and no play, and Angelo found the long days tough going.
What kept me doing it was I didn't want to let my father down. He was a brother of Uncle Peter, and it was my father's wish that I should be there, and I didn't want to sort of go against his wishes.
If making ice cream was hard work, selling it was at times even harder.
I had to go and sell the ice cream, pushing the cart along the Coleraine streets. And I used to get very tired, especially if it was warm. And very often I would have to stop and maybe fall asleep. Little boys would come and, you know, sort of try to get ice cream, or sometimes they used to even ruin it by throwing things into it.
The business flourished, so much so that Uncle Peter opened a second shop in Portstewart. Uncle Peter had no children of his own, so Angelo was given responsibility to run this shop. He gave it his all, but felt that his efforts were not really being rewarded.
I told my father that I wanted to leave. I didn't see any prospects of starting on my own. So he got in touch with his brother, my Uncle Peter, and he said, if you don't give him a chance to start on his own, he's going to leave you. So he'd no choice. He gave me the Portstewart shop.
So, for the princely sum of £600, the deal was struck, and Angelo Morelli's business future now lay in his own hands. Although Angelo was now settled in Portstewart, his childhood sweetheart was still in Italy. So he headed back, determined to woo her.
I came back to Casalatico and to Anastasia. She was a beautiful girl, she was a wonderful person, and gradually she impressed me very much, with the result that in 1931 I asked to marry her. And the father at first was a little bit disconcerted because he thought I was a little bit too young. I was only 23 and a half, you see. But in any case, he did manage to accept my offer, you know, of marriage to his daughter. When I brought my wife to Portstewart in the little flat, I was so depressed because there was very little in it. And she probably had thought that she was going into a lovely home, but being both of us very much in love with each other, we just said, well, we'll have to make it.
And make it they did.
I suppose we've been a landmark here for many years and people have become used to coming here.
I feel a sense of history in some respects that we're here that long.
I'm rather surprised actually that we've become famous.
There is a responsibility that comes with that, and certainly we're well aware of it, and my father and grandfather would remind me of it from time to time.
Today, the businesses are still thriving. Eldest son Nino and his family run the shop in Portstewart, while the youngest Guido and his family run the Portrush shop. They also make the all-important ice cream to a secret family recipe.
Whenever my grandfather first made ice cream in the early part of the century, it was all vanilla ice cream, or plain, as the locals like to call it. Nowadays, we have up to 90 different flavors, so it was a lot different from the olden times, you know.
But middle son Corrado decided the ice cream business left him cold. He decided to take a chance on a different line of business.
I never really did like it very much, so I decided I would try something else. There was a business for sale, amusements, in Portrush, and I decided to have a try at that. I walked into the place and I asked the owner would he sell, and he said he would, and we agreed on a price, and I bought it and went into that. That was in 1976.
Corrado's gamble paid off and his business venture thrived.
We have no problems at all between the brothers. The only thing I refused to do was to start business together with them, because I thought as Italians we don't get on too well in business, you know, as partners.
Personalities are inclined to come in and have a few arguments, a few rows, and then the business suffers because of it. So we decided in the early years of our marriage that we would each become independent of each other.
We've got on magnificently ever since.
Despite living most of their life in Northern Ireland, the Morellis still feel close to their Italian roots.
I suppose first of all I'm Italian. My parents were Italian. I was brought up in Italy as a child, and those first impressions always remain.
Well, he's given it away. Del Vecchio, it could be 2-0 here. It is.
I feel more Italian than I do Irish, but because of my name, I support Italian football teams. If Italy is playing Ireland, obviously I would support Italy.
Del Vecchio, cool as you like, 2-0.
I feel very happy with both. And actually, I get a thrill when I go back to Italy. I get a thrill when I come back here.
As Italians living in Ireland, it would seem that they have the best of both worlds. But as Angelo can vouch, that wasn't always the case. For the last 20 years, Angelo has spent most of his time back in his original family home in Italy. The warm climate obviously suiting him. Nino and Corrado were both retired and now able to spend a lot of their time in Italy with their father. But as young boys, that was far from being the case.
My mother wanted to come back to Italy, and she would have liked me to have let my two sons come with her. That I was delighted because I wanted them to learn Italian. I wanted them to learn their own language and also be company for the grandmother.
It was a bit sad to leave our parents at that age, obviously. But we were going to stay with our grandmother in Italy, so it wasn't too bad. When we did arrive, unfortunately, they locked us up in a school as boarders, and that wasn't exactly very pleasant.
But worse was to come. It was 1939 and war was breaking out across Europe, and Italian dictator Mussolini was forging alliances with Nazi Germany. But the significance of these developments passed over the heads of young Nino and Corrado. To them, all the military preparations and posturing in the build-up to war was a fascinating time.
Mussolini was a big man then. Everybody saluted him and admired him, and we were the same. We were all dressed up in little uniforms, and we had to carry wee guns and pretend we were soldiers. Do you remember that?
Yes, balilla.
Balilla, anyway, it's like a Boy Scout at home, that sort of thing. We wore black shirts and little hats with feathers on them and things.
However, with Italy teetering on the brink of war, it was a worrying time for Angelo. If Italy was to enter, his family would be split across both sides of the conflict. A father's worst nightmare was soon to be realized.
Then Italy came into the war in 1940, the 10th of June.
The backlash against Italians living in the UK was immediate and extreme. Like hundreds of other Italian exiles, Angelo feared the worst and prepared himself for the inevitable.
And I was picked up at 5 o'clock in the morning by the local sergeant of the police in Portstewart and taken to Crumlin Road jail. I had my bags packed. I knew what was going to happen. I felt it was going to happen. I was a member of the fascist party because everybody in those days was a member of the fascist party if you want, here in Italy, if you wanted to have a chance to get work. It wasn't because of I wanted to be a fascist or a communist or anything else. It was just a thing that was done.
But being a fascist card holder was enough to bring Angelo to the attention of the authorities. His crime of simply being an Italian in the wrong place at the wrong time would cost him dear. Forced to leave his wife and child behind in Portstewart, and with his two other boys trapped in Italy, the war years were a particularly distressing time for Angelo Morelli.
I felt terribly sad about the whole thing of having to leave my wife with one little boy. He was quite young, Guido, my youngest son, and not knowing English terribly well, and having to cope with all the difficulties of trying to run a business in a sort of perhaps what I thought then would be a hostile situation.
It was left to Anastasia to run the business and look after youngest son Guido. These were hard times, and it's perhaps no surprise that the two were to develop a specially close bond that was to last a lifetime.
She spoke Italian to me and I spoke back in English to her. So she learned English by me and I learned Italian from her. But she used to slot me into her side of the bed at night, and then when she'd come up she'd roll me over and I was a human hot water bottle for her. We had a very, very strong relationship, and but she was a hard taskmaster and very honest and very brutal at times. But I loved her very much.
But before long, Anastasia and Guido were forced to leave their shop in Portstewart, as they were considered a security risk to the Allied naval base further along the coast.
My mother was eventually moved out of Portstewart for various reasons. She was considered an enemy alien and perhaps in a position to signal subs coming along the north coast.
Now, what I couldn't understand, I shall never understand, what danger she could have been to the war effort around there. She never would have known anything about those things, and it was difficult to really realize why she had been sent away.
But all was not lost, as friends rallied round to keep the shop open until Anastasia was allowed to return. In fact, Anastasia turned out to be a shrewd businesswoman, and with her at the helm, the war years saw the ice cream business boom. Meanwhile, Angelo had been moved to a camp in Lancashire, where he awaited his fate with others classed as enemy aliens. But in what proved to be a simple twist of fate, Angelo managed to cheat death by avoiding what later proved to be a fatal journey.
A roll call was held, and names were called. Ones had to go to the left, and others had to go to the right. I was called to go to the left, shall we say. Then, at the end of the roll call, my name was called again. And I was told to rejoin the original group. They'd made a mistake. There happened to be two Angelo Morellis, and strange as it may sound, they both came from the same area. The ones to the left had to go on the Arandora Star and were directed to Canada, whereas I was directed to the Isle of Man. Unfortunately, on July the 2nd of 1940, the Arandora Star was torpedoed and sank with a loss of 700 internees.
British survivors from the Arandora Star were cheerful enough in spite of their ordeal. When a Nazi U-boat torpedoed the liner, the death roll was greatly increased by the panic which spread among 1,500 internees.
I thought to myself, God has been good to me. I've been very, very lucky that there was a mistake made and rectified in time.
Germans and Italians are said to have fought for places in the boat.
It was Angelo's hope that his sons would be safe in Italy, as their home in the mountain village of Casalatico would be of little military significance. However, as war raged in Italy, the region was to become central to the conflict. The nearby area around Monte Cassino had been heavily fortified by the Germans, determined to prevent the Allied advance on Rome. Far from being a safe house, the Morelli family home in Casalatico was commandeered by the Germans as their headquarters.
At this stage, the Germans decided to evacuate the whole village. They said that they thought the front would move up towards where we were. Corrado remembers vividly what happened, actually, because the soldier lifted them up to put them on the lorry. And what happened
Yeah,
then?
well, Granny thought that they were taking us away from her. And she actually lifted a hatchet, and she went for this SS captain, actually. And it's something I've never forgotten, because he lifted me and put me up in the back of the lorry, and tears were streaming down his face, which was so very odd.
This human face of war would be a rare sight for Nino and Corrado. In the fierce fighting that was to follow, the boys would witness the horrors of war at first hand and narrowly escape death themselves.
There was a thing happened during this period which Corrado remembers vividly. He scared me to death, I'll tell you. Tell him the story.
Well, I think we were walking along one morning. We were going for milk along the country road. And there's about 3 or 4 German lorries full of jerry cans, for petrol. They were stacked really about 20 feet high. And they went by, and next thing we heard these planes. And the lorries stopped under some trees, and we knew that they were going to be attacked, and actually, well, I certainly didn't. Nino ran under a bridge and says, come on, we're going under the bridge. And I panicked, and instead of going under the bridge, I went underneath one of the lorries. And he kept on shouting, and in the end I said, oh my God, and I got out from below the lorry and ran and joined him. And we were there for 2-3 minutes, and up the lorry went.
It was as close as that.
So we had a very close call there.
I nearly lost Corrado.
It's now nearly 60 years since Angelo was sent to the Isle of Man along with hundreds of other Italian internees. Now, in the hope of achieving closure on this traumatic chapter in his life, he has decided to return to the island to finally confront his past. He's travelled with Nicole, one of his granddaughters, to meet with Manx historian Roger Sims to recall those bleak days.
He's given here.
Yes, but this is amazing. This book amazes me.
There's quite,
To see
quite
so
a lot
many,
from
so many names,
Belfast and Northern
so many
Ireland
names.
Yes. On this particular page, we find a Mr.
There you
A.
are.
Morelli, 52 Main Street,
Portstewart, that's me.
Portstewart, Northern Ireland.
That was me.
That has to be you.
Yes. But there were many others from our
There's some
part.
from
There was
Coleraine.
Caffolas, Nardelli, yes.
Jean Ardelli, Coleraine.
Yes. That's Nardelli of Coleraine, I remember him.
Mm-hmm.
I was the tenor of the camp.
Were
I
you?
had quite a nice voice in those
Right.
days, if I may say so.
Indeed.
And we used to hold concerts in different houses and bringing, I wouldn't perhaps say tears to the eyes of the rest of the inmates who had become sort of emotional listening to someone singing Italian songs when at night we used to hear the bombers bombing Liverpool. Those memories still are in my mind. That singing alone brought a little amount, a very small amount of happiness to the inmates, making them feel at home sort of style.
Looking at this material today, what is it like seeing the register and seeing the photographs?
Oh, it brings back so many
So many.
memories, so many memories. Many of them, I wouldn't say happy, but nevertheless, I always tried not to look at things from the bad point of view. I tried to sort of think that eventually one day I would rejoin my family.
Angelo spent over 3 years on the Isle of Man. However, with the barbed wire and armed guards long gone, this is the first time he has walked a free man in Douglas.
When you look out now from here,
Yes.
from behind the wire, we're at the front of the wire, you were always at the back.
That's right,
This was freedom and that was the camp.
exactly.
How does it feel today being here?
Well, you did feel a little bit, all right, very depressed because no one likes to be deprived of their freedom.
Precisely. And of course, looking down over the beach, there must have been times in the summertime when you looked out and you saw people enjoying themselves.
Well, I think most of the internees made it a point at a certain hour of the day when the beach was crowded to try and have glimpses of these beautiful ladies in their swimsuits going into the sea. I don't recall the remarks.
Isle of hope, Isle of tears, Isle of freedom, Isle of fears. But it's not.
It was a day of mixed feelings, I think, for my grandfather to come back to a place where 50 years ago he was imprisoned. And it didn't quite hit home, I thought, until we got to the museum and we saw his name on the register amongst many of your friends. And I think that's when the emotions kicked in, and for both of us, really.
Always on your mind.
I've been very grateful that it has been made possible for me to come back and reminisce. I've seen more of the Isle of Man in a few hours than I have seen in 3.5 years that I've been interned here, behind, of course, barbed wire. It may not be just the Bay of Naples, but really it's very entrancing and most beautiful. I shall always treasure the memory of this day.
As you can see, we're here in Cassino, and this is where the famous battle took place. We virtually remember parts of it. We remember the bombing of Monte Cassino. It was a fantastic sight, you know, these hundreds of air fortresses going past our house, heading in this direction. And you could hear the bombing happening. I can still hear it. They organized these lorries, and they told us they were going to take us back to our homes. But as they got nearer to Cassino, they decided that it was too dangerous. There were too many bombs lying about, mines, things like that. And in actual fact, I have a vivid memory of the lorry driving through Casino, getting a puncture, and we watched Corrado and I in awe and despair, like these piles of bodies lying everywhere.
Yeah. They were stacked, you know, like wood.
And there were scavengers.
Road, like that.
Do you remember the scavengers going about taking rings off them and things like that? We remember this, you know.
The Allied victory at Monte Cassino enabled them to advance on Rome and so assume military control of Italy. However, with victory came the problem of returning thousands of impoverished Italian refugees to their homes.
We were running about no shoes. My granny had made up knickers, if you like, or bathing costumes out of flour bags. We used to sleep with a pillow made of that was full of beans. We used to eat the beans, you see. And gradually the pillow disappeared. But it was just as well because we were pockmarked every morning when we woke up.
In the chaos that was post-war Italy, the chances of the Morellis being reunited seemed slim. But once again, it seemed a guardian angel was looking after the family.
They told us we had to come to this place near Naples called Alersa.
Yeah.
That was like a place where they used to keep people who had...
it's a madhouse for want of a better word. I don't know what you call it in English. But.
And we were trapped in there for about 3 or 4 months, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But the commandant, this chap who was in charge, called for us, and he says, "You're Angelo Morelli's sons." Yes. He says, "I'll look after you from now on." And he was very nice, and he helped us, and eventually made arrangements for us to get home.
The camp commander was William Irwin Cunningham, who coincidentally had been the town clerk of Portstewart. In a remarkable twist of fate, he found the little boys and recognized their name.
Miracle, really.
Miraculous.
Every time we come back, really, sort of comes back.
Made us very close. So, an adventure. But I wouldn't recommend it to anyone.
The last time I saw Nino and Corrado here in Italy was just prior to the outbreak of the war. And I didn't see them again until I was released from internment in 1945.
After 7 long years, the Morelli family was together at last.
We were so excited. It looked as if it was another world. I mean, when we were all reunited after so many years of absence with each other and having gone through what we did go through.
I can distinctly see my mother and father standing there, and Guido, little boy that size, with a big tummy on him, big smile, red cheeks, you know. Do you remember?
Yeah, and we were like this.
I was 14 years old and I was 6 stone 2. I was just like that. And, well, I can't describe the moment. You can do it.
No, can't.
These 2 skinny links came out of the plane with, and I obviously laughed, and they laughed at me because I'm quite a portly person. They knew no English, so we communicated by sign language, and it was quite funny at times. But there's a lot of goodwill and love and affection.
The post-war years saw an economic boom, and the Morellis' family business prospered. Times were good, though the work was as hard as ever.
Well, the hours were very, very long. There was no rest at all.
Seriously, when we opened the shop at the beginning of summer, we weren't allowed a day off. My father used to make us work like donkeys in the summer.
We had to make the most of it because it only lasted a few months or a few weeks. And if you didn't take the advantage of the business while it was there, you would have had to wait until the following year.
Angelo now had 3 shops, his legacy to each of his boys.
At a certain point, when they decided to get married, I gave them a shop each and a house. First was Nino to Nan Michaelis. He got Coleraine. Then Corrado, when he married Elizabeth, I gave him the Port Rush shop what they used to call the Shamrock Corner, the Savoy Cafe. And the same thing happened with Guido when he got married. That gave my wife and I more leeway to look after a new place which I opened at Portstewart called the Sunday Garden.
With the business going from strength to strength, the boys were able to indulge their hobbies, in particular their love affair with fast cars.
I'd never had any passion for speed or anything like that. The same can't be said about Corrado. Not so much Nino, but Corrado especially. And 2 or 3 times he knocked my cars over, destroyed them on me. So he was very expensive in that sense, because he loved going a little bit too fast.
I used to deliver ice cream to a place called Kilree, which is 20 miles from Portrush, right? And every time the phone rang, if he reached it, he would go. If I did, I would go. And we used to do it in 20 minutes, 20 miles then, bring the ice cream, 20 minutes back. Daddy used to allow us 2 hours. So then we spent an hour and 20 minutes on a golf course. That's how we started to play golf.
He doesn't remember this.
Yeah, I remember it all right.
Well, he tried to beat me, you see, to get to Kilree. So he stepped into the van and drove to Kilree, and he realised he didn't have any ice cream with him.
Forgot to bring the ice cream, so I got no golf that day.
This fascination for golf and fast cars has passed down to the next generation, notably with Corrado's son Dino, who brought the Morelli name to the international racing arena.
With my dad around, there was always a few nice cars around. First sort of real contact was father arrived back from Italy one Christmas with a motorbike, and I think there was 4 at the time. That was when the bug bit, really. So I made it as far as Formula 3000, just below Formula 1. I won all the championships there was to win in Ireland, the karts on the way, and British Formula 4 Championship, which was won by guys like Irvine and whatever from here. Got the 3000 and sort of raced against pretty much half the grid in Formula 1 now. It's a bit hard to watch at times when you knew, I could have been there myself, but for the accident.
Accident is something of an understatement. In fact, Dino was lucky to survive the high-speed crash at Nürburgring in 1997.
It was basically in the middle of a torrential downpour. And when that happens, you can't see where you're going at all. You just sort of rely on sound and your peripheral vision out, we're judging where you are on the side of the track. And there was a car just in front of me, which I didn't see in the spray, and I went straight into the back of him, which tore the front off the car, and then the accelerator actually stuck wide open. So I carried on about another half a mile down the straight, with my feet basically dangling out the front of the car, and went into the barrier at the end. I think it was just under 140 miles an hour.
The injuries ended his racing dreams. Now it was time to go back to the family.
They finally got me back home now to Ireland and started working a bit in the business. To be honest, I'm enjoying life now at the minute. It's without the sort of stress of racing. Although I loved it, I had a chance that many people will never get. So I made the most of it, and now it's time to get down and do an honest day's work.
I started playing golf because of my dad. He was a keen golfer, and because he worked so hard and we didn't get a chance to spend so much time with him, that whenever he played golf, I used to go with him. It's great because it gives me 4 hours with my dad alone on the golf course, so it's our quality time together.
The third generation of the Morellis may be able to play hard, but they continue to work hard too.
Hard work was drummed into us from an early age, and we're not afraid of hard work, and we believe success is, gained from hard work.
We've been involved in it from kids. I remember as 5 years old standing on a chair and pulling drinks from the Coke machine. It's just in the blood, and I love being in the cafe. I love the hustle and bustle of it. I love the free ice cream. And I just got involved. We all seem to just be geared towards that path. My parents never stood in our way. We could have did something else if we wanted to. But I chose to be in the family business. I'm very passionate about it and precious about it, I suppose, as we all are.
In 1994, Anastasia, who had instilled the work ethic into her family and kept the business going through difficult times, died suddenly. Angelo still feels her loss greatly.
After
been with my beloved wife for 63 years. Even though she's dead 9 years now, I miss her terribly. And I come here to visit her, bring her flowers, and say a little prayer to her grave. And although we'd been together for so many years, we had hoped to still be together for another few years. I feel sad yet about it. I pay my respects to her as often as I can, and it brings me near her still. Dearest family, one of my greatest dreams in life was always to be together, all of you, before the end of my days.
Today is the big day for the Morelli family. 4 generations have travelled from all parts to pay their respects to Angelo, the head of the family, and their much-loved bisnonno, the grandfather.
I don't know how to express my feelings about this very, very wonderful day, to have all members of my family, the dearest ones perhaps, are missing. But our thoughts are with them this very day. But I do want you to feel that you are all within my heart.
It's an absolutely wonderful day. I mean, just to imagine that we can get the whole family together, it doesn't happen very often. And as the family gets larger, it gets more and more difficult. I went that far to bring my son back from Australia, and it's been wonderful to see him, especially, you know.
I wish we'd have done something like this before, you know, all of us got together. It's very nice, although there are 1 or 2 missing, but it's lovely.
There's an opportunity, a very rare one too, that the most of the family gets together. It's amazing.
And that's the story of the Morellis' eventful passage from Castlatico to Portstewart.
That was one of the desires of my late wife, to see the 3 brothers working hand in hand with each other, help each other in case of need, and keep the family happy.